Welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my returning co-host. Glad to have him back after he was out last week, Connor Rebish. Connor, this UFC 216 card, we were just talking about this, doesn't seem to have people very excited. And I had to go to bat against the UFC Okami OSP card last week and took some flack from that. Not a lot of flack, reasonably. There were a lot of people who were like, yes, you're right, it's shit.
Yeah.
Preaching to the gospel out here. But there were some people who really got on me for saying that. And then I turn around this week and I see people who are like, oh, this card's terrible. And I'm like, really?
Lord, I hope they're not the same people, because I don't know how you can approve. I don't know how you can approve of the Japan card and not this one. We were saying just before we started, like, the only knock you can give this card is that it doesn't have a gigantic, compelling matchup at the top. Like, to me, Tony Ferguson, absolutely a main event fighter. Tony Ferguson versus Kevin Lee. He's favored at 2-1, so maybe it doesn't have quite that kind of burn. You got Johnson versus Borg, which is like, Johnson's challengers are typically not super compelling because they don't have that much time to prepare. Like, those are the knocks. But in terms of the names you get to see, the kind of action that looks like we're set for, just the matchmaking over the whole card, we got guys like Tom Duquesnoy here. We got Beneil Dariush versus Evan Dunham, a sneakily amazing matchup on the main card. We've got Lando Vannata on this card. We got Magomed Bibulatov. Like, the matchmaking from top to bottom, I think, is really solid. And even if the matchups aren't that great, it's Tony Ferguson and Demetrious Johnson. Like, I can't complain.
Yeah, I'm even like even if I know if I feel like I know how those fights are gonna go, I'm still very compelled to watch those fights. Like, Demetrious Johnson, I was just thinking about this the other day, and it's kind of, and I hate to draw this parallel because of the whole like record thing, that who gives a fuck other than Demetrious Johnson about Anderson Silva's record. But I kind of compare, I feel like this is kind of like Anderson Silva in his mid-title run before he really got the Chael Sonnen pop that gave him superstardom, when he was only selling like 300,000 pay-per-views or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, people kind of like to erase that now. Like, oh, Anderson Silva was a major star for... It's like, no, for most of his UFC career, he was a guy that did really well and that not that many people showed up for comparatively.
Yeah.
But this is kind of like that to me. It's like, I would never not show up to watch Anderson Silva fight.
Of course.
And I'm not going to not show up to watch Demetrious Johnson fight, Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is a pretty rare opinion. You can't tell people how to feel about a fighter. It's fine if you don't like his fights, but I agree with you. Like, from my perspective, there's no way I'm not going to see every single Demetrious Johnson fight I can, because the things he does in the cage are amazing. And as you said, both of the B sides in the top two matchups, I think, do have some interesting things to present the people they're fighting. They may be stiffer challenges than most assume. So I'm looking forward to talking about that.
At the very least, I think they're going to provide action fights, because they're both supremely confident fighters in what they want to assert.
Yeah, and interestingly, both Kevin Lee and Ray Borg, two of the best athletes in the UFC, like two phenomenal physical specimens. So that alone.
They're great athletes. They're super confident. And at an elite level, that means that they're going to probably go after their opponents in ways that are going to make them fun. Like, even in losing, they're going to be fun losses, This isn't Demetrious Johnson, Chris Carriasso here, where Carriasso I don't know if you read that piece recently about all the people who fought Demetrious Johnson talking about what it's like to fight Demetrious Johnson. And Carriasso, like, right before the fight, just suddenly was like, I just realized, I was like, oh shit, what am I doing?
Like, it's like a character in a movie, like becoming a movie star overnight, and you're like, I don't belong here. Like, Chris Carriasso had powerful imposter syndrome before he fought Demetrious Johnson, and honestly, he kind of should have. Like, he shouldn't have fought Demetrious.
He was a fun action fighter and always came out and did his best over his career, but he was in no position to take that type.
It's not a knock on him. He just didn't make it there.
But like, Borg is not that. No. if you have seen anything surrounding Ray Borg, he, like Tony Ferguson, is that special kind of fighter insane where you're like, your disconnect with reality is one of the main things that keeps you going here, isn't it?
Yeah, powerful ability to just ignore things that are troubling or every other normal person would worry about. Yeah, Borg is more in the category of the Cejudos and the Horiguchis, like guys who maybe, they're not at the point where they are going to have their best chance against Demetrious Johnson right now. But Borg is definitely a guy that Demetrious Johnson will probably fight again.
Yeah, and those Cejudo and Horiguchi fights, they were both great fights. Like, those were fun fights to watch. They're much better fights than DJ versus Carriazo or DJ versus Moraga, or, you know.
We could talk about that all day, because I thought, like, DJ versus Wilson Hayes was super fun to watch, and
yeah,
I tend to enjoy most of his fights, though. I get the reasons people don't like him, but
yeah.
Anyway,
let's start down at the bottom here. A flyweight bout, Marco Beltran versus Matt Schnell.
Boy, I really had some relatively high hopes for Matt Schnell, and it has just not worked out. His game is not just that, you know, he's been knocked out. Like, his chin is obviously not ironclad.
Having a bad chin for flyweight is a really weird thing to have.
Yeah. Not being able to take single shots, because the single shots are rarely the problem at 125. You know, and he's faced good punchers. Like, both Rob Font and Hector Sandoval have power, but also Sandoval knocked him out with like a hammer fist. Just put him out cold with a hammer fist on the ground, which is kind of strange. So there's something going on there. But the bigger issue is that in both those fights, Schnell's game wasn't really working. Like, he's always had sort of this disjointed reactive style, which doesn't tend to flourish in the UFC the way it does on the regionals. But it really isn't working. Like, despite being a solid athlete, despite having a good frame, despite having a really nice submission-based scrambling game, despite looking better on the feet than you would expect from a guy with his inexperience and his grappling background, he's stuck in this sort of like Gilbert Burns position without ever having achieved the things that Gilbert Burns achieved. He's like just Gilbert Burns, but the pre-release version. He's not quite there. And, Marco Beltran is obviously a much more forgiving matchup just based on the fact that he's not like a crushing knockout puncher. He's not going to have, at least if power is the problem, he's not going to have that much power. But frankly, I think just being tougher might be what this fight comes down to. And Beltran, I think, is much more capable of creating and surviving in a scrap. Even in the fight with Davis and Alcantara, he took a lot of punishment and had to be stopped by his corner, if I recall correctly, but was still coming back for more. And Schnell is unlikely to put him in that situation in the first place, but also the fact that Beltran's wrestling, his everything, I just think he's capable of being more aggressive with less risk than Schnell, and I think that may be the decider here. So I'm going to go with Beltran. I think it might be a TKO, maybe by ground and pound in round 2 or 3.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me. This is a really tough call for me, and the big reasons, like you said, are Beltran not being a big power puncher at all, and also not having, like, he's been knocked out a couple times, but he really hasn't faced any of the power punchers like Schnell has either.
True.
So we don't know exactly how Beltran would do in a really good, like, firefight.
That's true.
The other thing here is that I think that going to flyweight was a huge mistake for Beltran, and I'm really concerned that he's staying there.
That's a very good point. And I can't even think, I don't even know why I didn't bring that up, but a big part of the Alcantara fight, he looked weak and tired so quickly.
Yeah.
Yo, okay. I'm gonna have to change my pick because he looked really bad at 125.
Yeah, that's why I'm kind of leaning towards Schnell, is that Schnell, you know, he is very hurtable. I think a big part of actually what happened in that Sandoval fight, I was rewatching it, is that he had a prolonged clinch exchange early in round 1 with Sandoval where they just traded hooks like Fry Takayama style. and his legs went out a couple of times in that. And I'm pretty sure he was probably buzzed pretty badly, so that by the time he got clipped on the ground, he may have already been like his, you know, the synapses were already not firing all that well. That kind of thing where you see a guy get hurt a couple times in a fight, and then you're just waiting for that one shot that puts him all the way out.
Yeah.
But it's going to be tough because he doesn't have, you know, Schnell doesn't have the chin for flyweight, and
he does get into those situations. Like, there's no reason he should be in the clinch trading hooks with a much bigger puncher.
Yeah, he loves to scrap. He's a very willing scrapper, and that's really like how he fights at his best. He's not even a good, like, he doesn't initiate a lot of the wrestling or grappling that he does. Most of his success is out of reversing people, out of like throwing up a submission attempt off his back and using it to sweep, and then getting on top, and then getting submissions or ground and pound. It's all problem at flyweight, but Beltran also, everybody who's tried to take him down has succeeded. He's also a scrambling grappler.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is a tough one. I'm banking on Schnell just off of cardio, that I don't think Beltran should be a flyweight, but
I'm going to switch my pick. First pick of the card, not a good sign for me, but I think I did not even consider how terrible Beltran looked at 125, and it really had a huge impact on that fight.
So I'm picking Schnell, and you're picking Schnell.
Yeah, stamina alone, I think, is a strong argument for him.
Because Schnell will go after him and create scramble. Yeah. Like, they will keep that pace. And they actually have a really similar striking style, which is kind of funny. Like, they both like to do this bouncing thing and throwing a lot of high energy kicks and then rushing in with a few punches, like head on line. It'll be weird. It'll be an interesting fight. Should be fun. Odds on this fight, Schnell is very slightly favored. Opened at -190, adjusted straight up to -122, is at -125. And Beltran opened at +150, dropped straight down to +104, and is now at +101. So not a lot of movement on those lines, and they're pretty close, which is how they should be. Beltran absolutely could not land a shot to knock Schnell out, or he could just gas the hell out and lose a decision. So
I'm going to recommend you bet on nobody in this matchup. That's going to be my very salient recommendation.
All right. That brings us to a middleweight bout. Thales Leites, Brad Tavares.
A fight for the ages.
A fight for the ages. Brad Tavares, I have been a little hard on him lately. Because he's such a, like, he's one of those fighters that really bugs me a lot. And because I think it's partially, as you've dubbed it, and I like this term because we've gone to it, and it makes a lot of sense, is that he's a young veteran who really hasn't fought enough to seem like he should be a young veteran. Like, he's at 19 fights over 10 years. Started when he was 19, so he did start young enough. Yeah. But he absolutely has that problem of just being willing to be like, am I winning this exchange? Did I get the better shot in the last exchange? Did I block that? Okay, I'm winning the round. I'm winning the fight.
Yeah. He never seems, it's the thing with these fighters, they never seem as proactive as maybe you would want them to be. Like, you can decide the pace. If you're Brad Tavares' opponent, you can decide the pace and the range and the intensity, a lot of those things. And Tavares is just going to do what he can to win the kind of fight you give him.
Yeah.
But often by, just sort of trying to shut down all the shit you're trying to do, which does not often lead to a very exciting fight.
Yeah, it doesn't. And this is probably because of that not going to be a very exciting fight, because Thales Leites is likely to give him a slow-paced range kickboxing match because he won't likely be able to take Tavares down.
Yeah.
Because if anything, Tavares, a part of that being that young veteran is you're confident that you can stop a lot of everything. And Tavares is very good at maintaining range and being hard to hit. and he's very good at being really hard to take down, especially from the clinch. He's got really good clinch offense and like clinch control. And Leites only works takedowns from the clinch, really.
Mhm.
And so I kind of see, like, this is going to be a boring fight that is exactly the kind of fight Brad Tavares wins.
Yeah.
Where his opponent gives him a slow pace and Tavares just barely outworks him.
Yeah, and it would be, I mean, this would be a great opportunity for Tavares to come out there and starch somebody with something of a name. You know, like it's a matchup in which he could do that. He's technically a good enough striker that he could wear Thales down a little bit and then storm him with punches and put him away. Or at least, you know, make a statement with a big, exciting round.
Yeah.
Tavares, you know, has Leites been finished? Did he get finished, knocked out in his last fight or something? It was like the first time ever.
Thales Leites has never been knocked out. He's been submitted once by Matt Horwich.
Yeah. The god, Matt Horwich. Yeah, Leites still's never been knocked out. So realistically, we're looking at another Brad Tavares fight, but I agree. Like this opponent suits him very well. Brad Tavares too is probably like in terms of career ranking or rating, he's I kind of realize now that in my mind he's been in an Evan Dunham dilemma where like Evan Dunham had those 3 straight losses, but then like 3 years later they all look like really credible losses.
Yeah.
And now I look back at his losses and it's like Yoel Romero, Robert Whitaker, and Tim Boetsch, who just knocked out Johnny Hendricks. Like Boetsch still has something to offer and is still a massive puncher. It's like none of those losses look bad at all.
Boetsch is exactly the wrong kind of fight for Brad Tavares, in that he's an extremely dangerous fighter that you can easily take over if you push him and punish him. But if you just let him hang around, then you're just giving him openings to be dangerous all fight.
Exactly. Yeah. So like none of those fights really look bad for Tavares. His fights aren't always that exciting, but he's, you know, he's a solid mid-ranked middleweight. Like he's still the same guy he was before he fought Yoel Romero, more or less. And that guy beats Thales Leites. So I like him by decision.
Tavares is the favorite right now, opening at -185, adjusting to -186 more or less, and dropping steadily to -213 into several big drops, and then just like today, jumping right back up to -183. So,
is there Tavares by decision?
Brad Tavares by decision, no. There's only under 2.5 or over 2.5, and over is at -230.
Oh, never mind.
Thales Leites is at plus. Let's see, opened at +145, has gone up and down, adjusted up to +166, and was there mostly until dropping to +148 now, and then up and down to +152. So a little late movement on that line, which
if Tavares were still to come down to about -160, 150, I do like the matchup enough for him that he might be worth a bet.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised by the movement on that line. It seems like unless Tavares is like injured or something weird.
Could be. Don't bet on it. Don't bet on it. Actually, I don't know why I even mentioned it. It's a weird middleweight fight.
Like, well, Tavares he's gonna make it a slow split decision. Like that is just the way he fights.
It has to be a split decision.
All right, flyweight bout. John Moraga, Magomed Bibulatov.
Boy, John Moraga, they really let John Moraga rest on his laurels after that gimme win, huh?
Yeah.
He's right back to work to defend the division against talented young fighters. Okay, that being said, I don't think that Magomed Bibulatov is likely to destroy John Moraga. And I think that John Moraga is capable of giving Bibulatov quite a few things to worry about. So I am actually interested in this fight.
It was actually the booking I questioned when it came up, because you don't gain anything off a John Moraga win over Magomed Bibulatov. And John Moraga is the kind of fighter who has a knack for picking up surprising wins against guys that are beating him.
Yeah. Although for me, like Bibulatov, like Moraga does present some hurdles that Bibulatov probably specifically needs to figure out how to solve. So for fighter development, I like it for him.
Yeah.
And if he loses, you know, I will always be happy if Bibulatov loses because of the regime he represents. So
it's true. It's true. He is a Kadyrov crony.
Yeah. So I'm happy if John Moraga beats him because I also like John Moraga a lot. So either way, I'm satisfied in some way here. Moraga, the things he offers here, he's a good wrestler and scrambler. Very few people manage to easily out wrestle and hold John Moraga down. Even like Joe Benavidez couldn't do that. I think, so he's typically competitive there. More importantly, he can put together volumes of punches. He can put together combinations. He's a pretty solid boxer. Always weirdly inconsistent, John Moraga, but he has some good boxing skills, and he's also tough. So if somebody sort of like freaks him out in the first round, he can maybe he'll definitely drop around to that kind of fighter. But like against Sergio Pettis, he can come back from quite a shellacking to actually take rounds and work his way into the fight. And all those are things that I have not really seen Bibulatov overcome, specifically the boxing. Bibulatov does not have pocket boxing. It's just not in his arsenal. He's got the big dramatic kicks. He's got the lunging overhands and lunging attacks like that.
The Sambo strikes.
Exactly. Yeah. Like his distancing, his timing, his distance, those are all really impressive, as they always are for those Sambo fighters. But the actual fundamentals and the tactics are not that varied. And Moraga has an edge there, an experienced guy with a diverse skill set. So I'm still going to take Bibulatov. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. I think that he can just create scrambles with Moraga. Like Bibulatov can push an insane pace using a lot of strength without slowing down visibly, which is something that, Moraga's a journeyman because he's not a great athlete. And that's basically what sets him apart from the elite more than anything else. So provided Bibulatov does not sort of freak out when he realizes that Moraga can hit him with 2 or 3 punches at a time and can probably stop the first or second takedown attempt in a chain, then Bibulatov's athleticism should be enough to get him the win here. But Moraga's a live dog, and either way, I think is a valid test for a prospect.
Yeah, I definitely think like one of the biggest places that I'm really most interested in for this will be Moraga's his headlock game and specifically his guillotine.
Yeah.
Because that's like one of the best ways that he's a great opportunist is forcing, if he can outbox as he should be able to, but really actually trouble Bibulatov, then he could force Bibulatov to get a little predictable in his shots and set him up for a submission. Like that's, it's something that he's done in the past, and it's something that Bibulatov may not have the perfect answer for. However, the big thing that makes me pick Bibulatov here is Bibulatov's sense of distance and his sense of being of fighting safe.
Lord help me if this is another Mateus Nicolau fight, because if that's kind of what you're suggesting, like a long range fighter who does not give Moraga the exchanges.
Yeah, and I think to Moraga's credit, he learned before that Sergio Pettis fight. That Pettis fight really showed a turnaround for him. He learned after that Nicolau fight, I actually have to throw strikes if I want to win fights. And he came out much better in his last 2 bouts, prepared to do that, prepared to work.
Sergio also threw a lot more strikes at him, so it's still tough to say whether faced with another like low-paced, long-range opponent, if he won't kind of shut down again without realizing it.
Yeah, it remains to be seen, but I do think he showed an attempt to turn the corner, because he didn't always used to be that fighter either. It was something that slowly evolved into his game, facing elite opposition where he's not the best striker in the world, and he was just like, well, I need to stay a little safer. I need to be a little, like, try to be a counter puncher more. And then it was just like, well, you don't pull the trigger on counters, so you just sit and watch people.
Yeah, I have been yearning since his UFC debut to see Moraga do what he did in the fight with Useless Gomez, which was like one of his best performances ever, but just combination punching.
Yep.
Aggressively is something he does really well when he does it.
The other thing, though, is that in his regaining some of his aggression lately, he overreaches a lot when he throws going forward. He tends to swing out into open space, get his head and his shoulders out over his feet, and that sets him up for being taken down. And he's not a great counter wrestler. He's a very good grappler and a very good scrambler and a good submission threat and a decent offensive wrestler. But I think we're going to see kind of what a lot of fighters find out when they face some of these Caucasus fighters, where it's like, oh, I can scramble through with a guy like this on the ground. I'm ready for that. And then they get on top and it's just like, I can't move.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like his athletic ability for Moraga. Like he's trying to match speed, like without having such great boxing technique or strategy that he can outthink these opponents. When he faces somebody who's like fighting an athlete's long range game, he's like trying to do the stuff they're doing, just much worse than them, because he can't leap across space that way. And so I think he's a very good wrestler, obviously, but he just like puts himself into positions trying to play somebody else's game that he can't defend a takedown.
Yeah. And that, if Bibulatov is smart enough not to just go out there and try to test his striking and to, turns this into a wrestling and grappling clinic, then I think he's too big an athlete, too experienced in those positions to give Moraga space. So I'm picking Magomed Bibulatov, and probably by decision. Moraga is still tough and hard to finish. Bibulatov might be able to submit him, but
decision sounds right to me.
Yeah, Bibulatov has plenty of decisions on his record over reasonable opposition, so he's not like a magic submission machine.
Yeah. And as we saw in the gimme fight that Moraga had, like the Mokhtarian fight, his grappling is still very much a strength.
Bibulatov is a heavy favorite over John Moraga, opening at -425, adjusting down to -531, and currently at -526. Moraga +305, opening at +305, adjusting up to +423, and sliding back down to +393. Those odds seem wide to me. Bibulatov didn't exactly run the table on Schnell Lausa. So I think there's room for Moraga to do work if Bibulatov stays at range and has a kickboxing match with him. I mean, his offense isn't that so deep or varied that you can be like, oh, he's going to absolutely take a kickboxing heavy decision from John Moraga. It could be a close split.
Has Bibulatov transplanted partially to Mark Henry's gym? I think I may have seen some pictures of him with that crew, along with, like some of the other ACB guys trained with Frankie Edgar. If so, then I hope so is all I'm saying. That'll be the last thing I say, because Mark Henry is exactly the dude to turn somebody like Magomed Bibulatov into a good boxer.
Yeah, let's see. Yeah, apparently he has.
So if he continues to do that, then that may be exactly what he needs to improve in the ways we want to see him improve.
Yeah, that would be good for him. Let's see, that brings us to heavyweight bout Walt Harris, Mark Godbeer, and Walt Harris is going to knock Mark Godbeer out likely in the first round.
Yeah, probably.
Godbeer, he has some okay kicks. He is big and reasonably light on his feet for a heavyweight, but every time he throws punches, he dips his head and sits in the pocket and doesn't move and just kind of starts winging combinations. And he's basically just there to be blasted and countered by Walt Harris. So.
Yeah, that sounds about right. We're talking about differences in athletic talent. Like, that's kind of all you need to say here. Like, Walt Harris might be the best athlete in the heavyweight division right now. He's up there with guys like Francis Ngannou, and he moves quickly. He's super light in his feet. He has massive power. Mark Godbeer is a dude who is just struggling against the limitations of his own body in every single fight.
Yeah.
Walt Harris is going to find his chin pretty quickly, I think.
Yeah, Harris, Harris lacks the heavyweight chin, and he lacks the combat sports background, which are things that are probably going to hold him back permanently. But he's better than he's better than the bottom end of that division.
And we also know, like, despite the chin, we've already seen Walt Harris overcome one of the worst starts to a UFC career anyone's ever had.
Yeah,
and turn in some really, really solid performances after that. So he's
got the confidence. He's learning to fight more defensively, stay out at range. Respect that his chin is not that great. Pick his spots. He'll be a decent heavyweight. He's going to have a decent heavyweight career going forward.
It's like, what if Alistair Overeem discovered the style he uses now before getting knocked out a billion times? Yeah, that's kind of Walt Harris. He's just like young. Late career.
But also, Overeem started as a teenager as like a really good grappler, and then moved to kickboxing and did all the combat sports stuff early.
Walt Harris has a lot of the same physical characteristics as a guy like Overeem, and he is learning a style that works for that type. But he's just way earlier in the progression.
Yep. Harris. Let's see. Walt Harris is at opened at minus 320, spiked up and down, adjusted to minus 290, and is back out to minus 315. Pretty stable, not a lot of movement on that line. Mark Godbeer opened at plus 240, up and down to plus 248, and is now at plus 247. I don't like to see heavyweight odds, especially like lower end heavyweight odds, get that wide, but this is a pretty forgiving matchup for Walt Harris. So
I agree.
I assume that he will be a center point on many parlays and points games out there.
Yeah. Is there a total on this fight?
Let's see. Under a round and a half is minus 120. Over plus 100.
Maybe.
I would be the under might. I don't know. Whatever.
Sure, heavyweight. It's heavyweight.
Out there. All right. Brings us to a women's strawweight bout: Pearl Gonzalez, Poliana, Botelho.
All right. Poliana Botelho, having watched her fights, she certainly makes the record of Viviane Pereira look a little more impressive. Pereira came to the UFC. That's Botelho's only loss, and Botelho's pretty solid. Like she has a lot of hallmarks of like the unproven Brazilian scrapper, where she's very tense and just like waiting to land a big punch. And as soon as somebody gets into range, she throws way too eagerly and gets her feet out of position, just swinging. But she's got power. She's pretty accurate. And when she is at range, she can time a nice counter or a good kick to the body pretty well. The big thing I'm wondering about in this fight is how proactively can Pearl Gonzalez force Botelho to grapple? If she can, I think she has a much better chance of winning this fight. Not that Botelho can't grapple, but she tends to do so kind of defensively. And Pearl is like, she's only reactively defensive on the ground. She just gets caught in submissions all the time, but very rarely actually gets finished by them. And often will like force the kind of fight where you have this crazy pace on the ground because you keep thinking you're going to finish her, and then she's advancing past your guard and she's making you scramble and she's setting up her own submissions. That's the kind of stuff that I think could be a very strong advantage against an inexperienced fighter like Botelho, to just be drawn into a pace she doesn't want. But Botelho has gone 4 rounds. She went 4 rounds in her most recent fight. She's gone 3 rounds before. She doesn't seem to have stamina problems. She's got the power. So even if Gonzalez is the sharper striker in a lot of ways, the more consistent striker, Botelho is probably going to be the one landing the shots that count. So I'm going to go with the newcomer. I think Poliana Botelho by unanimous decision, but I think she might get a knockdown or 2 at some point.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me to pick because I really do think that Botelho's game is not like it is not been polished in any way, shape, or form.
No.
You know, when she steps into exchange, she just gets wild. Like
Square, both hands.
Fight, if you saw clips of her fight against Silvana Gomez Juarez, like she got dropped twice, once really hard because she just has her chin up in the air and she's just swinging hands out there. And it's like, yeah, you've got a little power on that, but all that woman had to do was just like duck under, throw an overhand, and just put you on your ass.
Or just take her down. Like, you're open for everything when you do that. Everything.
She is open for absolutely everything. On the other side, Pearl Gonzalez, she throws good, long, straight punches with good speed and snap. But she's really awkward and foot slow. Like, just really foot slow. She's big and strong in the division. But you have this better athlete who's just wild and totally unstructured, and then a fairly structured, really not very athletic fighter on the other side. And that's a tough one. I'm gonna lean Botelho as well, or Botelho as well, just because in those fights the athleticism tends to win out. The better athlete, the person who's more aggressive and more willing to just go out and try and make something ugly happen, often tends to win those bouts. But if Gonzalez can stay, like, if she can just kind of keep long punches coming at Botelho, and as you say, like, maybe jump on her when Botelho falls over, or just, you know, if she can push her back and take her down, get on her and try and stay on her. But I don't know. I don't have faith in her ground game to be like, oh, she's absolutely gonna, you know, if this hits the ground, Gonzalez is gonna take it, because her record is no better in terms of level of competition. And most of her submissions she's gotten are arm bars, which suggests that most of the submissions she's gotten are off her back as well.
Yeah, she's kind of all over the place. Like, I think the real advantage she will have on the ground is not just that the pace could wear Botelho out, but that for a fighter who like misses a lot of technical details because they are so caught up in exchanging, I think that would present an opportunity for Pearl to find a submission on the ground by chaining attempts together, like 2 or 3 pass attempts in a row, 2 or 3 submission threats in a row. That kind of stuff can force a fighter like Botelho into some really bad positions, which is exactly what she does on the feet. But I don't think that Pearl is quite athletic or aggressive enough on the feet to have the same success there. I do hope after this fight, Botelho should get herself to Evolução Thai. I think she would fit in so well with Dita's fighters, like with the Francisco Trinaldos, like just crazy power punching athletes who learn to make that style work in a fight. Would be perfect. Right now she's at Nova União, but Lord only knows what is still happening at Nova União these days, because that team's kind of collapsed.
Yeah. Botelho is the favorite. Opened at -150, adjusted up and down, finally kind of settling out to -130 and drifting down to -137. And Gonzalez opening at +110, down to up and down to +111, basically right back there, and then out at +112 now. This fight seems really hard to see clear advantages. Like, it's so hard to me. It's so hard to know how the grappling goes. On the feet, my bet is that Gonzalez lands some nice sharp 1-2s and maybe even hurts Botelho a couple times, but also gets swarmed and outpaced a bit and kicked a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, the leg kicks at Botelho are pretty legit.
Yeah, and I don't think that Gonzalez can keep up the long 1-2s just as her main like standard on the feet. But I also don't know that Botelho can keep it on the feet. So it's gonna be a funky mess of a fight. It's gonna be a bit like Kylan Kern versus Alexandra Albu, where like you're watching it and you're just like, okay, one of these women is a really great athlete who has no clue what she's doing, and the other one is not athletic enough to implement any part of her game.
A fight we all remember so fondly. So make sure, write down the date. Don't miss this one. It's going to be just like, you heard it here first. It's going to be just like Albu versus Curran. That classic of the division.
Oh, all right.
Can't wait.
Next up, lightweight bout, Bobby Green, Lando Vannata. This will be an interesting fight. Like, Vannata, he's hit this unfortunate point that is sort of, it's that reality check that you're not, well, I think it's a lot of the reality check that most of the dudes who come out of nowhere and just storm a division as this impossible new contender just a couple years into their career do so in divisions that are really heavy and ripe, or in the heavier divisions that are ripe for people to come in and pick people off. You know, there's a reason that your Chris Weidmans and your John Joneses don't happen below 170.
Yeah.
Because
good luck for any fighter just marching through the lightweight division. Like that's...
Yeah. Because I think what we've seen with Lando Vannata was a fighter who very much thought he was the next John Jones.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, he came in, he's just like, I am going to rule. I don't have to worry about anybody or anything or plan for shit. I'm going to go out there and just take people's lunch money. And he's taken a couple hard losses because of it. I mean, the Tony Ferguson fight, you know, even he probably didn't go in expecting to win that fight. He came in hoping to make something happen early, and then, you know, and shocked Ferguson with how unusual and how confident he was.
Mm-hmm.
But the David Tamer fight, that was a wake-up call. That's you need to realize that there are people who are way more technical, fundamentally technical than you, and who can put consistent pressure on you and take the fight to you. And if you're not prepared for that, they're just going to win. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah. Somebody who can identify your weaknesses, can identify the holes in your game, and then just spend 15 minutes jamming knees and elbows through those holes. Like, there's just not enough connective tissue in Vannata's game to hang with somebody like Tamer, who is, and especially in his striking, is just put together really well. He's a very complete fighter.
And I don't think that's going to be a problem against Bobby Green. And the big reason for that is pace.
Yeah.
David Tamer came out and said, I'm going to give you consistent applied aggression that you have to have defensive solutions for. You know, you have to show you have head movement fundamentals and, you know, defensive fundamentals to go with your flashy offense when you're striking, because I'm going to be right here putting together good, solid combinations all fight.
Mm-hmm.
And Vannata didn't. Green is much more, he wants to be on the counter. He likes to hang back. He's not, when he has to come forward, his head tends to be straight up. He tends to get a little awkward and out of position. He's not the most creative fighter leading. He kicks really well. He kicks hard at range, but he's very much a hang back. Let me see the openings you provide me. I'll counter them. He's very much absolutely the classic young veteran that we've talked about.
For sure. Bobby Green might be the original.
Has fought since 2008 and has fought a ton, is now 31 fights into his career.
Yeah. Bobby Green might be the very first young veteran.
Yeah. Because he fights like that, because he's looking for the perfect strike in the moment, because he's looking to just kind of control and shut down his opponent, he just lets stuff drift away, especially I think in fights against somebody like Vannata, who's going to be more creative and more able to wow the judges. That's going to cost him. You know, it's even if Green is landing just as many strikes as Vannata is, being on the receiving, you know, having somebody throwing like wheel kicks and, you know, body hook combinations and things like that and leading the fight all fight, the judges are going to be like, oh, well, that guy's winning.
Could look like the Barboza fight. Like, Green doesn't exactly know how to pick and choose when he like pulls a face or when he reacts to something. So it ends up, well, and sometimes also like, I think he does get frustrated sometimes when he doesn't get the fight he wants, and he looks like it. And that's never a good look for the judges. Yeah.
And and Vannata, you know, he has yet to face the high level wrestling tests that will really test his takedown defense. But he looks like he has a pretty fundamentally sound idea of how to stuff takedowns. Green is a good wrestler, and he will go to it. Like, he will press for the clinch and press for takedowns. But he also seems happy to not wrestle. Like, if that's not happening, it's not like, oh, I'm going to like go in and really try to do wrestling work on this guy. He'll accept like, okay, well, let's get back to range. Let's go back to boxing and let's do that for a while because I'm comfortable there. And I think I can win those exchanges too. And I don't think it's going to be a thrilling fight. Well, it'll be a fight that lets Vannata look good would be my guess without providing a lot of thrilling, really clean offense.
Yeah, and I think that might be especially the case because lately Bobby Green has been a clinch wrestler. That's been his new tactic to neutralize his opponents as he, I think, realizes he's slowing down and maybe losing a step after such a hectic career that has also been quite long at this point. You know, it's, I guess, 9 years, but again, 31 fights in 9 years is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
And a lot of them against top guys, and a lot of the recent ones not going his way. So I think that will be interesting, that Vannata could be put in a situation where he might get frustrated. I think the big thing for Lando Vannata is he, on Heavy Hands this week, I talked about him not having, like, watching his work a lot, which is, he definitely does that. Like, Tamor caught him watching his own work a lot of times where he would land a punch or miss a punch, but he would kind of see what would happen next without immediately moving to his next reaction, his next defensive movement, his next attack.
That's kind of what I mean about him having the confidence that he was going to just run through the division, is that he doesn't pay a lot of attention to what his opponent might be doing.
Right. And that's I think the bigger issue is that like he just doesn't have like the fundamental base to know how all the things he wants to do are supposed to work. He's not reined in enough to know when is the right time to do something crazy and when is the wrong time. Or, you know, like, when should I respect what's going to come back at me? And he wants to be like John Jones at his most arrogant and most flashy all the time. But even early in his career, John Jones is a cerebral fighter. He's not just somebody who, you don't just get to go out there and style on people because you really want to. You style on people because you are pretty sure in that moment they can't stop you, right? You don't just do it out of the blue. So if I haven't gotten
he's a bit like Yoel Romero if Yoel Romero wasn't at lightweight or at middleweight or light heavyweight.
Sure, yeah. In some ways,
Romero just tried to do his like, I'm just gonna drift through and see everything at all times fighting style at lightweight.
Yeah. No. Especially when Romero like first started to like develop his like bouncy footwork style, and you're like, a long time goes by and he's like smirking like he's doing something really cool, and you're like, what are you doing? Like, you're not setting anything up. Yes, Vannata does that. He doesn't. He's like a perfect example. I would not be surprised if Vannata went into a sparring session or a fight. He comes out there, he hasn't gotten his distance yet. He's against an opponent with a reach advantage. If he decides, you know what, first thing I'm going to do is hang my chin out there to make him think he's got a shot, and I'm going to pull away and counter when he goes for it, which is a move that works. But it's a move that works once you've established the circumstances for it. You have to know what shot he's going to throw when you hang your chin out there. You have to know what speed it's likely to come at. You have to know what defensive move you're going to do. Like, there has to be some planning and some thought put into this. It can't just be, I'm better than you, so I get to do anything I want at any time. And the big problem there is also that it causes Lando to gas because he doesn't have a control over the pace at which he's fighting. Everything's a huge power shot, and he seems to think I'm better than you, so I can do whatever I want. And so he tires himself out. He gets hit a little too much. All this aside, he's a huge puncher. He has phenomenal sense of distance and timing, a very awkward rhythm. He's still relatively inexperienced. He's been fighting for 5 or 6 years, but defense tends to be one of those things that comes after a while. And being at one of the best camps in the world, I have to imagine that Vannata is going to have more opportunities for introspection and correction than a lot of other fighters in his position would.
You can't think that Gibson walks out of that
Right.
chamber lost with Vannata and is just like, well, we don't have to change anything.
Yeah, Brandon Gibson, I'm sure, was not at all satisfied, despite the fact that was a fun fight.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that Green is on the downside. Vannata still has a ton of potential, and he needs to kind of correct some things, but the dude almost knocked out Tony Ferguson on a short notice debut, and that's not a fluke. Like he has that talent. So I like Lando Vannata. I think it may look a little bit like the Dustin Poirier fight once Vannata gets into his groove. I think it's possible that Vannata knocks Bobby Green out. If he doesn't, and if he does not show more control earlier in the fight, Bobby Green could absolutely steal some later rounds or put Vannata in some bad positions because he's very crafty, he's very tough, and that clinch wrestling game can make up for the fact that he doesn't typically have the volume to test a guy like Vannata. So I'm going with Vannata. I'm thinking a second round TKO, but Bobby Green is a live dog.
Yeah, I was just thinking Vannata's kind of like Mark Diakiese if Diakiese had spent his whole career at a better camp.
Yes, right. If only Mark Diakiese was like at Jackson Winklejohn right now, he'd probably do great there too.
Yeah, like it's that same kind of thing where Diakiese comes out and he's just like, I'm just going to beat everybody, and then he fights Drakkar Klose, and it's just like, here's a dude who just had not the most complicated game in the world, but it was designed to shut you down, and you didn't, respond with any answers.
Yeah, like weirdly, these are the guys that the young veterans often have the best shot against, because somebody who just stays safe and neutralizes can really mess with somebody who is used to like lulling their opponents into crazy exchanges and coming out on top without hardly trying.
It's true. It's true. I don't think Green offers enough anymore.
I don't think so either. But still, like, he could piss Vannata off and annoy him, and that alone could be a foot in the door. So I'm still intrigued by the
If he can make Vannata tired, that could be a real interesting problem.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by it.
Vannata opens as a favorite, opening at -260, climbing up to -220, and has stayed pretty level there now, -219. Green opening +180, adjusting up to +192, and then dropping slowly back to +175. So those odds slowly closing somewhat.
It feels all right. I mean, Vannata should be favored, but
he's shown the ability to lose fights. It's not like he's just this unstoppable wrecking machine.
Right. We're not even just talking about, oh, here's some flaws. We're waiting for them to be exposed. They've been exposed. Now we're waiting to see if Vannata can fix them. And until he does, his lines should probably be fairly close with most, top 20.
With experienced high-level.
Yeah.
Lightweight bout next. Will Brooks, Nick Lentz.
This is me. Okay. Will Brooks, man. Talking about Matt Schnell being sort of a letdown before. What about Will Brooks? Like, what a start to his UFC run. 2 straight losses, both completely unexpected. After the fight over Ross Pearson, which, while fun, was maybe not, what we were expecting to see out of Will Brooks. It certainly wasn't what he showed in his Bellator run. The issues for Brooks seems to be, I think too, Will came into the UFC thinking that he was untouchable in a way. I do think he thought that, I think he was surprised by both Oliveira's when they tied up with him and he felt their strength. I think he did not take their physical strength seriously. I think he did not take the pace that UFC fighters tend to set very seriously, which is a lot harder to overcome as a spoiler type than it is in Bellator. It's a lot easier to outlast somebody like Michael Chandler than it is somebody like Alex Oliveira. Their styles just are suited for different organizations. Chandler tends to fight kind of a slow clip and then slow down. And Alex Oliveira is just like a big powerhouse who just pushes an uncomfortable pace from the beginning. And even Ross Pearson doing that was able to give Brooks some serious problems. So aside from the fact that I think we all sort of agreed that he was going to have a difficult time getting back to the 5-round fights for which he is designed, for which his game is suited, even beyond that, like, there seems to be a physical wall for him in the UFC or something. Physical or mental, it's hard to say. But he has just not performed. And I think Nick Lentz is exactly the ideal opponent to determine whether or not he actually can perform in the UFC or whether or not he will end up washing out. Lentz is still a solid fighter. He's very experienced. He has spent a lot of time dealing with the matchups and winning the kinds of matchups that Will Brooks has clearly struggled with in the UFC. But he's also on the downside of his career. He's not a huge power puncher. He is not typically as aggressive as maybe he needs to be to fight a guy like Will Brooks. Like, he can definitely be outclassed and kept at a distance on the feet. And he can also be outworked in scrambles by a better athlete. And this is the one matchup now since the Ross Pearson fight in which I think Brooks is the better athlete, clearly the better athlete than his opponent. So I like Will Brooks by decision here. I think Lentz's scrambling is going to make it an interesting thing, but Lentz is not at his best when he is forced to scramble. Lentz is not at his best when he's forced to grapple from his back and move around a lot. He's at his best when he can hold you in position, and that is not something anyone's really done to Will Brooks without being a substantially better athlete or a much bigger man than Nick Lentz is. So I'm going with Will Brooks by decision.
Yeah, it's interesting because Lentz is a weird fighter in that I actually think he is a reasonably hard puncher and reasonably aggressive, but he's never learned to be a good striker at all.
Yes.
And so he's pretty much never been an effective puncher.
That's a better way to say it. In that fight I always think of the fight with Chucky Olives where he hit him with that right hand. And I usually mention this when I'm thinking about Oliveira's tendency to fold, but also it showed that Lentz is just not a good finisher at all with strikes. Like, he had Oliveira turning around, turning his back on the fence, and did not know how to turn that into a knockdown. So
yeah, he's the fighter who would classically at featherweight absolutely dominate people for 2 rounds of controlled, like, up against the fence, ground and pound, just pushing them into the cage, landing these little short shots. He'd do it for 2 rounds, and then he'd hit like gas hard and get worked for the last round.
Yeah.
And that's been how he's fought for years. And now he's getting older.
Even the Michael McBride fight was like exactly a classic Nick Lentz fight. Nothing has changed.
Yeah. Now he's getting older. He moved back up to lightweight, and he's packed on more muscle. And I think it is not, it's probably not helping his cardio any. It's making what was 2 rounds of cardio, maybe more like 1.5, maybe. Mm-hmm. And it's especially a problem against guys. And part of the problem here, along with not being a great striking finisher, is that he's not a good grappling finisher either. Mm-hmm. You know, his last submission win was over Waylon Lowe in 2011. And this is for a dude who's known for like tons of grappling positional control time. Mm-hmm. And before that, it was Dan Lohman in 2008.
I remember that fight, of course. Of course I knew that already.
So Lentz, Brooks he's good at fighting off submissions. That Oliveira choke, like, as quick and as bad as that was, as big a mistake as he made in that fight, that was crushing his face, and he still fought it for like 20 solid seconds before he tapped. Will Brooks, it was the first submission loss of his career. He's been very hard to submit at all points. I think it was probably it seemed like a shocking loss even to him. Just like I didn't think anybody could choke me.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Because he had his chin down, too. It was across the chin, but Oliveira was just, like, crushing his jaw into his face.
Also, people don't know, but, like, you could choke somebody out blood choke style when their chin is down. You just have to put the pressure on the sides of the neck. Like, you can also jam the chin into the windpipe. Like, it's not actually an ironclad defense, and especially not against somebody like Oliveira, who will get the finish if you give it to him.
Yeah, and so, Lentz, you're really kind of talking about, is Lentz going to, even if Lentz gets some control time on Will Brooks, which has happened before in the past with other Will Brooks fights, even in Bellator, he's let guys like take him down, put him against the fence, work on him a little. This is much more the type of matchup where Will Brooks tends to thrive, which is somebody who's going to spend a lot of energy on him early that they probably can't carry late or use to finish him. And it's much more likely to turn into a Will Brooks taking over the last couple rounds on Lentz and getting the win. So,
yeah, I agree. I did get distracted briefly while you were talking, looking at the names of some of the events that Nick Lentz fought on early in his career. And I just want to give a shout out to how insanely Midwest a lot of this is. We have EFX Myth in Maplewood. We have Twin Cities Throwdown. And Beatdown at Four Bears.
and also Throwdown at the T-Bar.
Also, Brutal Fight Night is when he beat Dan Lohman, and that's brutal spelled with 2 A's. Why would that be the letter you would double? So, Nick Lentz, what a storied career.
Yeah.
No, I think your read on the fight is pretty much spot on. And I really hope that Will Brooks can find a way to make his style work, because he did some beautiful things as a Bellator champ. He really had some the kinds of performances you don't really see in MMA that often. He had some really artful, control-based performances that I thought were really enjoyable to watch.
He just has to figure out how to fight without letting his opponent, like, part of his fight plan in the UFC cannot be, I'm going to let you do work on me while I figure out what you're doing.
Yes.
Because dudes like, Alex Oliveira, like, you let Alex Oliveira have a bunch of clinch cage control on you, and he will break your fucking rib. Yeah. Like, he'll just do that, Or Charles Oliveira, you're like, oh, okay, you took me down. Fair play to you. I'm going to stand up, and we'll restart this. And he's like, I'll just take your fucking back and choke you,
Mm-hmm.
Like,
the one time he decided to come forward and be really aggressive was against Ross Pearson, who we all know is at his best when he gets to counterpunch off the back foot. What are you doing, Will? Like, what's your plan in these fights?
Yeah, I think there maybe needs to be a little more attention to who his opponents are and what they can do. And
yeah, maybe you're right. I think that it seems like he just doesn't seem to know what to expect from these matchups. He's surprised when he loses. Like, he just gets caught off guard and doesn't know what to do.
So, that brings, let's see, odds on that fight. Will Brooks is a heavy favorite over Nick Lentz. Opened at -300, adjusted down to -340, and is now up to -368. And Lentz opening at +220, adjusting up to +285, and now at +287. So, I'm surprised they're that wide, given Brooks' trouble, but this is a really good matchup for him.
Yeah.
Not many props on these lines, interestingly.
Yeah, I guess just nobody cares about this card.
I guess so. Over 2.5 -250, under 2.5 +210. So
the lines also suggest that nobody's betting on them, because the lines all make complete sense. Like, the only one
I've seen have much movement is that Tavares Leites line, which frankly surprises me that it would have that movement. That seems more like one where people would be like, yeah, this is pretty set and cut and dried. But anyway, damn it, click the wrong button. Whatever. Brings us to bantamweight bout, prelim headliner, Tom Duquesnoy, Cody Stamann. And this is, let's see,
this is you.
Me. Fire Kid time. This is a great, like, as a Tom Duquesnoy fan, this is a great fight.
Yes.
If you're a fan of Cody Stamann, I'm sorry. Like, this is a great building block fight for Tom Duquesnoy, because Cody Stamann is very much, he is the fundamental nuts and bolts of what makes a good UFC fighter. You know, he's reasonably athletic, he's powerful, he's a good high octane wrestler, he is a consistent aggressive striker who changes his targets. He's not particularly deep in any aspect of his game, technically. His boxing is coming along, but it's still like, offensively it's coming along. Defensively, it has huge problems. Stamann does not really look like he can counterpunch at all. Like we saw in that Terrion Ware fight, a big reason that fight was so close, despite Ware being a much lesser athlete than Cody Stamann, was just every time Ware marched forward behind strikes, Stamann just shelled and backed up and put himself against the fence and tried to weather the storm. And that's not something you can afford to do with Duquesnoy, you know?
Yeah, understatement of the episode.
Yeah, what we saw, what was interesting rewatching that Patrick Williams fight, which was a great fight, and it really made me wish that Patrick Williams had started MMA a decade before he did. Is that, like, Williams was the weirdly tough matchup for Duquesnoy, in that he's an elite athlete and a great wrestler who has speed and power in his hands and likes to counter. And that meant that Duquesnoy's creativity and defensive liabilities coming forward were a real problem against somebody that he didn't, he obviously came out thinking, I can just walk over this guy. He doesn't have anything for me. He's nobody. I can just do what I always do. And it's like, no, this guy's actually really fast, hits really hard, and then can wrestle much better than anyone you've ever faced. But Williams didn't have control over pace at all. He still, because his career started late and because he's still learning and he never has developed that deep a game outside of his wrestling, didn't know how to control pace. That really cost him a lot. Stamann does know how to control pace, to his credit. He's very good at just keeping a same like output, making sure the fight stays at a pretty even, solid clip. But he's going to be open coming forward, even though he changes targets well. He's not a defensive master when he's throwing. He's, still there to be hit. He's very open when he's shelling and moving away. And then while he's got a power takedown game, if you see the takedowns that Williams actually hit on Duquesnoy, they were really crafty, like high work takedowns where Williams got an ankle, came in on the hips, changed an angle, and then used like an extra burst of speed and power to get Duquesnoy down, and still didn't keep him down.
Yeah. People, that was the thing that shocked me. I said that's on Heavy Hands too, but when I did a piece on Duquesnoy just before his UFC debut, a lot of comments are like, I guess we'll see how good he is at wrestling. I'm like, he's really good at it. If you watch his fights, he could get taken down, but he bounces back. He's also a very underrated submission grappler. Like, he is a complete fighter in that he has a well-rounded game in every single phase. Yeah. Clinch, wrestling, defensively, offensively. He does everything really well.
Yeah. So, you go watch that Williams fight more for, without the surprise of Williams doing well, like having already seen it.
Yeah.
And you actually can see, like, Williams is a fantastic technical wrestler. And he did some things that Duquesnoy wasn't ready for. And even still, Duquesnoy, was able to survive, make him pay for that pace and hurt him. Stamann doesn't have, I haven't seen that technical depth of his wrestling. He's a power wrestler who goes in for a single power shot, and if that catches you off guard, he'll put you down. But he's not a great top control guy either. He tends to he starts to go for offense and lets people back up and then resets and restarts. He's kind of got that alpha male style of wrestling where it's like, oh, you hit the big takedown, went for something immediately, it didn't work. Let's just reset on the feet and go back to a kickboxing match. And
which I think works. It's like it's an experienced fighter sort of tactic that sort of belies Stamann's age and inexperience. I mean, he's a fairly experienced fighter, but
he's actually not that young or inexperienced, but he seems like he is because nobody's talked about him or paid any attention to him.
Was he like 27?
He's 27 and started in 2011. So
so he's his game isn't completely finished yet. He's still developing fighter, but it is a boon for him that he does seem to fight at a mental level that you would expect from a little more experienced fighter. He makes the right decisions based on his skill set.
Yeah, and it's just, I think against Duquesnoy, you have to be able to punish him more for his own offensive mistakes, which I don't see Stamann being able to do. Or you would have to be able to, take him down and like really lock him down in a way that few fighters can. And I don't see that out of Stamann. I think this is going to be, it might be it might be a competitive fight for a little bit as Stamann is willing, Duquesnoy's had a lot of fights that end up looking pretty competitive for a little bit. Like his bout with Alan Philpott or that Ashley Grimshaw fight he had or not Ashley Grimshaw, but Brendan Loughnane fight he had that was a lot of people thought Loughnane won.
Yep. And a lot of it was Loughnane's, size and strength.
Yep. I expect this to look pretty competitive for a while, but I think sooner or later Stamann gets caught hard and then Duquesnoy jumps on him and finishes him.
Yeah, there's not much I can add to that. Duquesnoy, like there are things I want to see out of Duquesnoy as he continues to develop. I don't think he's, even saying that he can do pretty much everything or he can fight at every phase pretty well. There are some problems in his game. Like he didn't need to pressure everyone so aggressively. He can maybe establish his routes of attack as he pressures, something that a similar fighter in the same division, Tomas Almeida, also needs to work on. Like, Almeida came to the conclusion that he could box for a little bit before he pressured people, but he didn't use that boxing to set up his pressure. So like while he was boxing, he wasn't determining how he was going to begin to pressure. He's like, all right, 3 minutes has expired. Now I become aggressive.
Yeah.
And like I want to see Duquesnoy do the same kind of thing. I want to see him sort of ease his way into the aggressive game a little more, sort of feel out the pocket. I want to see him feint more, measure distance more. There are things I want to see improve. And obviously I want his defense to be better. I want him not to be so hittable as he's throwing. And I do think that Cody Stamann, like he's a step up in terms of potential, but stylistically, I think you're right. He may end up being a less threatening than Patrick Williams was, despite being like a better fighter, despite being a fighter with more career potential than Williams has. Stamann, they hold on, call Daisy Dong. Is that a good one? Is that a good one? They call him the Daisy Dong, but he's oh, you had
to work for that too. Oh God.
I ran out of a lot of good ones the first time we talked about him.
We did.
He's a good athlete and he's very strong, and his wrestling and stuff is based on that, but it could be beneficial here against Duquesnoy. I don't think Duquesnoy is very strong. Like I don't think he's much of a physical force. He has huge punching power, but in the tie-ups and stuff, he can be pushed around a little bit by bigger guys. And Stamann might be able to do that. But the big thing is that in that Ware fight, Stamann had he backed into the fence willingly. He kept flinging himself into the fence to avoid exchanges. And for all the other things you can say about how good his fight IQ was, that he knew when to hit a takedown, when to exchange, when not to exchange, he did not seem at all worried about the idea of fighting with his back on the fence. And if he comes into this fight, I mean, granted, he might come in knowing that that's not an option now and do his best to stay in center ring, in which case we're probably in for a much more interesting matchup. But if he does that again, that is a recipe for disaster. Duquesnoy is going to find his chin or break a rib or smash his liver or tear his legs down. Like eventually, if you back into the fence, Duquesnoy is going to find you.
Yeah.
So,
well, and I think the problem is more so even than like Tyron Woodley backing into the fence willingly or something like that. It's that Stamann, that's his answer to striking defense. That's the answer to the defensive fundamentals he doesn't have is shell up and back away.
And so unlike Tyron, who still has his defensive moves when he's against the fence, Stamann is there because he doesn't have those moves. So once he's there, he's kind of stuck.
Yeah. Because Ware found him a lot. Like Ware was able to hit him a lot when he did that.
Yeah, Stamann still hung with him in the striking. Like he showed a really nice left hook. He showed a good sense of distance and kept his feet moving a lot of the time. But also, like, you just can't afford to make the mistakes he made against Ware against Duquesnoy.
No. Odds on this fight, Duquesnoy is the reasonable favorite. Opened at -115 and stayed there for a while, and then dropped to -154 a couple days ago, and is now at -166.
I think he's still worth a look at those odds, to be honest. That's not bad.
Stamann opened at -115 as well, so these opened dead even. I don't know if this is just I don't know if the odds just like didn't update or something, or there was something.
I mean, I think too, like a lot of people were impressed by Stamann's debut. He announced himself with an impressive win. He showed a lot of really good moves, a lot of potential. And so I think a lot of people thought, Duquesnoy got hurt in his debut. He didn't deliver as expected. Cody Stamann far exceeded any whatever expectations, if any, there were about him. But the difference is that you have to think about the fight as a style matchup.
Yeah.
Not just as how good are both these guys, but how good are they for each other. And I do think that when you watch their footage, it's pretty clear that the matchup's a lot better for Duquesnoy than it is for Stamann.
Yeah. So Stamann was at 115 up until a couple of days ago. Then he jumped -115. Then he jumped up to +138, and he's now at +139. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm okay with relatively close odds, but Duquesnoy under, minus like 180 or so might still be worth a look.
Yeah, that's pretty close on Duquesnoy for a matchup that, because I even heard somebody like ping me the other day on Twitter. Oh, under 2.5 rounds is also +170.
Huh? How can that be?
I don't know. That might be like...
That's an option, man. Like,
yeah.
Stamann, I don't think he's ever been knocked out, but he's not fought Tom Duquesnoy before, so it's something.
Yeah, Stamann, like, he spent most of it... Yeah, that's...
You want to look through the record and name the 19 fights he's had at knockout promotions?
Yeah, it's seriously like he's fought on a pretty limited regional circuit where he's good. He's a well put together fighter.
Oh yeah.
But this is going to almost certainly be far and away the most dangerous fight he's ever had.
Hoosier Fight Club is probably the best one on here.
And he's if memory serves me correctly, scouting him a while ago, like he's a guy who he will get hit hard, and then his answer to getting hit and lit up is just to kind of keep coming after you.
Mm-hmm.
and keep taking shots and keep a pace and try to outlast you and be the tougher guy in there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's,
Yeah, I think I may have compared him to Mike Perry when we first talked about him. Like, not that his style is exactly the same, but there's still some of that. Like, you can see the athleticism and the talent. The idea is there.
Yeah.
But it's still coming together in some ways.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised at that. He's also training out of Michigan Top Team, which isn't the worst team, but it's not the best either. All right, let's see. Brings us now to the main card: Beneil Dariush, Evan Dunham. This is you.
Love this matchup, man. I'm a big fan of both of these fighters. I think both of these guys are like a lot of people who are stuck below the top 5 despite having great skills. These guys are kind of held back by athletic ability more than anything else, I think. Evan Dunham is ridiculously slow for a man who fights at 155 pounds. And That's really the only problem with Evan Dunham's game. Honestly, like everything else works really well. And if he were a little bit faster or a little more powerful, then he would probably make his game work at the very highest level. And Beneil Dariush is a fantastically well-rounded fighter who just tends to be surprised by things at times. Either he gets caught by a punch that's way too fast, he didn't expect it, or he gets wrapped up in a submission because he can't predict how well some of his opponents scramble, how quickly they move on the ground. But everything about both these guys just makes a lot of sense. Like their games are very complete and very well thought out. The question here is, does Evan Dunham's pace give Beneil Dariush problems? Because Dunham tends to throw about, I think he tends to land about at least two more punches per minute than Dariush. I think he lands about 5 significant strikes per minute compared to Dariush's 3 something. So a pace advantage Dunham has. Dunham has this sort of, it's never blistering because he's so slow, but it is relentless. And people crumble under that, and that can be a problem. But also, does Evan Dunham get to fight the kind of fight he wants to make that pace a problem? Because if Beneil Dariush pressures Evan Dunham, I think Evan will allow himself to be backed up and try to box a little off the back foot. And in that scenario, Beneil Dariush is pretty damn effective when he comes forward, especially if he can push into the clinch here and work Dunham with some knees. Like that's going to be a range at which he doesn't have to worry about Dunham's good boxing. He can use some of his Muay Thai skills to break him down and eventually maybe even get him to the ground. I think this fight will largely play out on the feet, though. And I think the difference is maybe going to be Dariush's power and aggression. I think he hits a little harder than Dunham, and I think he's going to want to come forward here. And Dunham is probably at his best when he gets to come forward. So I'm going to go with Beneil Dariush, although like it's not an ideal matchup for him. Like, for example, I don't know when the last time we've seen Dariush against another southpaw is, but his body kick is not going to be there, and that's always a huge weapon for him. I know he'll work around it. He's a smart, cerebral fighter. But Evan Dunham gives people problems who don't expect to struggle with him. So,
yeah, interesting thing here for me is, well, I think if Dariush does pressure Dunham, which I fully expect him to do, Dariush is a pretty dedicated pressure fighter these days. Is that I expect Dunham to try to wrestle him.
Oh yeah.
I don't think that Dunham will settle for being put on the back foot.
That's how he reacts rather than boxing off the back foot. Yeah, you're probably right.
Is that he'll try to take Dariush down, which is interesting because Dariush is a good wrestler and grappler, but as we've talked about, like with him getting caught off guard a bit there at times, he is not the world's greatest wrestler and grappler that at a point we were kind of led to believe.
Mm-hmm.
At a point, there was a time where it's like, well, this guy's an incredibly legit grappler and great wrestler, and you really just can't test him there at all. And Michael Chiesa kind of showed up and was like, you can. I mean,
you can.
You do. So I think there's something to that, but I don't know that I trust Dunham to be that. Like, he's not funky in the way Michael Chiesa is funky.
Yeah.
He's much more of a traditional lockdown, try and control position grappler than Chiesa is.
I don't think he's as good of an athlete as Chiesa either. Like,
no.
Chiesa doesn't look like the guys we usually call good athletes, but he's pretty strong at the very least, I think. And his scramble, he sets those things up really quickly. So
yeah. He's kind of like Chiesa's kind of like Tony Ferguson without any of the boxing.
Yeah, he's Tony Ferguson if Tony Ferguson was trained by Rick Little. Like, that's it, basically.
Oh God, that's terrible, but true. I think the other big thing I see here, and I may be wrong on this, but this is something that I kind of picked up recently, or watching Dunham's, especially his fight against Rick Glenn, where he really kind of got an opportunity to do a lot of what he wanted to do, is that as the fight goes on, Dunham's boxing gets more rudimentary and predictable. Like, as he gets tired,
interesting,
he gets just more like back to the basics, sort of like 1-2, throw things out there, bounce, kind of jump in, throw a couple punches, and
it's like he knows his pace is effective, but it becomes about the pace rather than about the targets.
Exactly.
About the openings.
And on the flip side, as fights go on, I think Dariush tends to get more crafty and better. Like his striking tends to get better. He builds on his striking round after round.
Mm-hmm.
He may not be able to keep. He may not keep the same pace. He may be open to being knocked out, so that when he loses a half step, he's not as tough. So when he loses a half step, like in the fight with Edson Barboza, where he went for the same move over and over again, kind of like let Barboza see it enough, and then when he did it a little slower, just got lit up.
Mm-hmm.
But Barboza was always faster than Beneil Dariush.
Yeah.
Evan Dunham will not be faster than Beneil Dariush at any point from moment one on.
Evan Dunham will not be faster than any opponent. Like, that's just the nature of his game, man. He is just the plotter of the division.
So I kind of feel like this could be a pretty even fight early that becomes less and less even as it goes on, and Dunham is forced into trying to keep a pace against somebody who is figuring him out better and better as the fight goes. So,
yeah.
I'm going to pick Dariush, especially because Dunham is nobody's idea of a knockout artist. Even as an improved boxer, he has 3 knockouts over his career, one of which was a doctor stoppage, and none of them recent.
Yeah. I like your read on it, man. I think you're right. I think Dariush is like the cerebrality of Dariush's game is something that does not get appreciated enough. Like anybody who's talked to him, Pat Wyman says all the time, having trained at the same gym as him sometimes, that he's a very, very intelligent guy who thinks really carefully about how he's going to approach each opponent and how his game is put together. So that kind of creativity and intelligence down the stretch is something that I think has been a factor in past Dariush fights. And when you combine with the fact, like, this is why I like Dariush, because he's that guy. I think that's his true self, but he's also a Rafael Cordero fighter. So he goes out there and just gets after people.
Well, and it's that idea. It's the loveliness about the Cordero style when it fits a fighter, is that it's that created pressure. It's not it's not just, oh, you're a natural pressure fighter and we're just gonna like tell you to take the brakes off. It's no, we're gonna like pressuring is the right way to fight. Moving forward and creating offense is the right way to fight, and we're gonna teach you to think about it and like do it consistently.
Equip you with the tools and the confidence to pressure. We're gonna make you into somebody who can do it well. And Dariush is now a very versatile fighter as a result.
Yeah. And like his chin and the lack of top end, like elite end athleticism are going to be problems with that style forever. But Dunham is not quite the right test for that.
No. Yeah.
Odds on this fight: Evan Dunham opened at plus 170, adjusted up to plus 206. And has fallen steadily to plus 190. And Beneil Dariush opened at minus 230, dropped to minus 274, and has risen since then back up to minus 236.
It still feels a little wide to me. Like, Dunham's got the wrestling, he's got the grappling chops, he's got boxing ability. Like, he's not super hittable. I don't know. I mean, he's matchup dependent as a fighter, but he's good.
It'd be really interesting to me to see if this fight goes to the ground, how it works out there. Because
me too.
Dariush has like we've seen him have holes there, and we know that Dunham can be a very relentless, tough fighter, and a good grappler. Like he's a very solid, consistently solid grappler. All right, that brings us to a women's flyweight bout. Mara Romero Borella versus Kalindra Faria. And I don't know what to make of this fight. Like,
Yeah.
I really, really wish. I wish we gotten Andrea Lee versus Kalindra Faria, because that would be something that, like, I hate to see women's bouts be like the least interesting on the card.
Yeah.
It's not something I want to see, but this is has the hallmarks of a pretty ugly fight. Borella rather, is really big and powerful. It doesn't seem to really have any idea what to do with that size and power. Like, she doesn't fight at a particularly high pace at all. She doesn't have the cleanest, she really wants to be able to bully people with her size. Have the idea of like, oh, I'm going to land something and it's going to be hard enough that you just don't want to strike with me. And I'm going to go after you for a takedown, and I'm going to be strong enough that you just don't resist. And unfortunately, her win over Milana Dudieva doesn't tell us a lot, because Dudieva's one of those weird fighters who's only good at one thing only, and that's throws. Like, that is literally the only thing she does.
Yeah. She must have been really excited when Ronda Rousey made it. She's like, oh my God, you can do it. You can just throw people.
Like, she doesn't strike, she doesn't wrestle, she doesn't have top control, she just hits sweet throws, and then everything else falls apart.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, Kalindra Faria is a aggressive veteran. She's been around, she's battle tested, she's had a lot of fights, but she hasn't picked up a lot of clean technique over that time. Like, she really has a sort of, swarming, take two to give two striking style. She kicks hard. But she's very, just sort of like, wait for your opportunity to dip into the pocket and just start winging punches at somebody.
Yeah. And
that makes this fight really tough to figure out, because you basically have a big, powerful athlete and then a less athletic, more consistently scrappy, but no more technical fighter.
Yeah. Like, what is Kalindra Faria's experience advantage here? I guess she won't be freaked out by the power or anything as easily as somebody else, but often experience advantage is like, I have more solutions to the problems than your other opponents, and Kalindra Faria kind of has one solution to all problems, which is just to be her.
Yeah, and the problem is that Kalindra Faria is also willing to turn off that aggression for long stretches. Like, if she doesn't see her opportunity to dip into to drop in and start winging strikes at somebody, she'll just kind of sit outside and wait. And
she wasn't very aggressive. I mean, it only lasted a couple minutes, but she wasn't very aggressive against Karina Damm.
Yeah. So that, those are like, that's a problem. You can't, if you're not going to be more aggressive and you're not going to be more athletic, then you're really driving for a potentially terrible showing. If Faria can keep pressure on Borella, she can win.
Yeah.
And I'm probably going to pick her to do that just based on that. But Borella, this is just kind of a coin flip fight that could easily be a 15-minute staring contest where you're you're gauging who landed 3 more strikes than the other person in that round. Or it could be a wildly sloppy fight where you're like, well, both people landed 40 ugly punches that round. Which ones, who do I think, whose ugly punches hurt more? So,
yeah,
I'm going to pick Faria for her experience and for her ability to more effectively pressure when she chooses to, but not high on it.
The other thing, the main thing I want to add about Mara Borella is that if we were talking about the distinction between somebody like Cody Stamann backing into the fence and someone like Tyron Woodley, she's definitely more like Tyron Woodley when she's not being aggressive. Like some of her, she comes forward in these bursts and tries to impose her size, but I think what she really wants to do is to counterpunch. And like the one fight that it really stood out, I don't know if you've seen her bout with let's see, it was Suvi Salmimiers in 2016. She I was at 135, so maybe that's the difference. Maybe she didn't feel like she was as bigger then when she was at 135. But even so, she would do this thing where she would chase Suvi off with a combo, with a counter, maybe hit her, maybe not, because she's not as technical or as accurate or as powerful as Tyron Woodley. But she would back her off. She'd get her halfway across the cage, and she would almost run backwards back to the fence where she had just started, which says to me that she's not there because she doesn't know how to defend. She puts herself in these positions because she's a kind of fighter who thinks, I got to land the one perfect shot.
Yeah.
I got to smash this person, and they're going to give me the opportunity. And I'm interested to see if Faria is aggressive and if she can be consistently aggressive and Borella falls into that pattern. I think the fight, like it might be a stalemate, but it might also be kind of interesting to see whether she can actually catch Faria with counter punches coming in, because you don't have to be a technical marvel to catch Kalindra Faria. Like even with you could say, oh, it's impressive she went to a split decision with Karolina Kowalkiewicz, but also like Kowalkiewicz had no difficulty hitting Faria on the way in that fight, like just catching her on the chin with right hands over and over and over again. It was just that the pace made it so that, also Kowalkiewicz was getting tagged. I'm gonna go with Faria for the experience, but I don't know. I think Borella might turn into something if she can clean up her technique. Like she could find a game that's not pretty but actually works. It's a kind of game like Tyron Woodley's game. I can imagine working really well in a less developed division against people who don't have, because even against people like Stephen Thompson, like well put together fighters who have approached past opponents with game plans, are kind of stifled by the idea of someone who just sits there and waits, and that's all they do.
Yeah, I mean, Danielle Taylor is,
right. Yeah,
marching up the division, winning fights that you would think she wouldn't just off that.
Yeah, and Borella's even more like Woodley than Taylor is, because she doesn't even it's not like she's an out fighter. She backs up to the fence and waits. She waits for you to go. It can be unnerving, and I would not be surprised if Faria was didn't throw as much as she normally does, because she can tell through her experience that Borella is setting her up for something. Now, granted, it's a wide right hand, and that's all she's setting her up for every time, but she's going to throw it whenever the opportunity arises. So I don't know. I think Borella, it's an opportunity for her to announce herself as an actual fighter, but experience, I'm going to go with Kalindra Faria, and it's probably not going to be a great fight.
Yeah, because you can imagine just as easily, what if Borella falls into that habit, into that rhythm, and Faria is like, well, I guess I'll just stay outside and wait for an opportunity to.
I hope that's what happens. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It makes it interesting, but it's probably the route to the worst version of this fight, because she doesn't have the skill and all that, but the experience gives her knowledge that when someone is sitting there doing nothing and looking at you and they're frozen with the intensity, they're setting you up. So don't leap in right then. It could be a stalemate. Just two women looking at each other for 15 minutes.
Could be the women's 125 version of Wonder Boy versus Woodley.
Oh God. Or perhaps more accurately, Danielle Taylor versus
Marina Moroz.
Yeah, it could be that kind of fight.
Yeah, although to her credit, Marina Moroz threw a lot more punches than Stephen Thompson. Just none of them came close to landing.
Oh boy, I was gonna say we should watch that one on the Depressed. We already did, and I forgot about it.
Oh God! All right.
Hopefully this will be a Depressed fight in the future. That's my hope.
Yeah. Faria is the favorite here. Opened at minus 270, bumped up to minus 189, adjusted up to minus 189, now minus 196. Borella opening at plus 190, adjusting down to plus 164, now at plus 162. Odds didn't open that long ago because this fight hasn't been on for that long, so no surprises there in the odds. And there's an over under 2.5 rounds prop, but my God, don't touch this fight.
Yeah.
Brings us now to a heavyweight bout. Fabricio Werdum, Derrick Lewis.
Oh, I feel like I'm like the more of the like this fight does kind of bum me out.
Yeah,
it's not really the highlight of the card for me, or a highlight of the card. Like it is funny that Derrick Lewis retired and spent as much time between his last fight and this one as he did before that fight and the one before it. So literally nothing in his career has changed despite his dramatic retirement. But also, like, I really kind of feel like we're seeing the end of Fabricio Werdum's time as a great heavyweight. I didn't like at all how he looked in the Alistair Overeem fight. And despite of...
And we lost him. Hey, at least you knew and stopped talking before it, because we always know what happens when... The weird thing is, though, this happened now at your mom's house. So what the fuck, man?
It's something with the browser or the computer. I don't know what. I don't think it's an internet thing even. I don't know what.
It can't be, because this is like a totally different location.
Yeah. Did you see me stop talking because I saw my little video?
I know. I did. I mentioned it even.
I knew it was about to drop the call. Yeah, I blame Hangouts. It's not my fault. Nothing's my fault.
Nothing is your fault.
Nothing is my fault. I feel like we're nearing the end. Like Fabricio Werdum, Overeem had the new style of Overeem I did expect to give him problems, but like it gave him a lot of problems. He looked really kind of unconfident in that fight, and that's really kind of been the key to his success. And his second UFC run has just been insane confidence. And it's also possible, like both physically and mentally, he just doesn't really have that fire in him to keep doing this anymore. And even if he does, his defense is terrible. And so that's a really dangerous thing against Derrick Lewis. Like Derrick Lewis absolutely could clip Fabricio Werdum with a shot in the first few seconds of the fight, like a counter to the first thing Werdum does. And Verdum's chin is often there. I mean, he'll tuck his chin, but his head is a target. He does not really have much head movement at all. So I don't know. I feel like it might be sad, but I also think that we know Derrick Lewis's ceiling more firmly now than we did a few years ago. Like, I think if Fabricio Werdum is still on the level of a top 5 heavyweight, that's definitely Derrick Lewis's ceiling. I think Derrick Lewis's game is just woefully incomplete, like in a way that it only can be at heavyweight. There is no way that a fighter like Derrick Lewis, who doesn't know how to block a body kick, who like can't grapple,
kicking game with a bad back. Think about that.
Yes, who can't grapple unless he's in top position, and really it's just because he's way bigger than everyone. Like there's so much missing technically and strategically from Derrick Lewis's game that if somebody just approaches him with like a good strategy, they can beat him. And the exception is that he just bides his time and waits for the opening. And that's why he's successful. He doesn't really have to have a whole game. He just has to not get killed and try to kill you before the 15 minutes are up. So I don't know. Either way, I'm kind of bummed out by the prospect of this fight. I'm not really 100% sure why, but I do think that Werdum, if he looks like Werdum still, that is Derrick Lewis's ceiling. I just don't think a game as incomplete as his, a game that consists so much of just waiting and trying to bomb somebody with a single shot, a game in which you throw like a jumping head kick for no reason because it just seems like there's just no structure, and not the kind of structure you need at this level. So I'm going with Werdum by decision. And if Werdum wins by decision, I don't think it'll be a particularly great fight, because if he was worried about Overeem's counters, think of what the threat of Derrick Lewis's power could do to Verdum's pace.
So there's an interesting thing. This is one of the interesting things here is I don't think that there's any version of Fabricio Werdum that is a good matchup for Derrick Lewis beyond just like so shot that any strike knocks him out.
Well, I mean, Fabricio Werdum knows how to throw a body kick, so like that alone might be enough.
Because the weird thing with Derrick Lewis is one of the, to really highlight how incomplete his game is. And I like Derrick Lewis a lot. I love watching him fight because it's just always likes
Derrick Lewis.
I'm excited for this because Derrick Lewis fighting is always theater. Even if it's
true, the
most boring, slow-paced, nothing happening fight imaginable, it is always theater because you know how hard he hits.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's the Shamil Abdurakhimov fight, which is awful, like he still broke both of Abdurakhimov's arms in that bout.
Yeah, there's something inherently captivating about the kind of power that Derrick Lewis possesses.
Yeah. And so I'm interested in it because of that. But one of the weirdest fundamental, I think the biggest fundamental flaw of Lewis's game that he has been unable to account for or build off of, and that continues to be I don't know that he's going to fix at all, is that he's not a counterpuncher at all.
He fights like he is.
He fights like he is.
Yeah.
But he does not counter strike.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really know how or show that he knows how.
If Derrick Lewis could counter strike, he'd be heavyweight Tyron Woodley with even more power. Like that would be a game that would work.
But what we see out of him is he knows he has to slow himself down. He knows he has to be patient. He knows he has to pick his spots. But eventually what his offense comes down to is kicks from range to just try and keep the opponent away. Maybe he throws good head kicks. So, catch him off guard with something, which he could. He could hit Fabricio Werdum with the head kick and catch him off guard and change the whole complexion of the fight in a heartbeat. But when he actually wants to produce offense consistently, it's a charge of I'm going to blitz you with a flying knee. I'm going to come at you winging a bunch of punches. And, in the Travis Brown fight, he was just getting shit kicked until it was finally oh, I should actually go after this guy.
Which is comical that he can just make that decision and it does have an impact on the fight.
Yeah.
But there is I think hope to catch them off guard with something kind of describes the entirety of Derrick Lewis's game. And it certainly works better for him than it would for anyone else. But it's not much to hang a whole fighting style off of. When you get to the elite
levels of heavyweight where everybody is, except Alistair Overeem, I still want to really see Derrick Lewis versus Alistair Overeem. That's one of my dream fights. Because
I'm into it.
You have a guy with that level of lack of durability against a guy who hits that hard and is that flawed and limited. I just want to see that fight happen.
Yeah, so do I. I didn't realize it till now, but I definitely want to see that.
But you put Lewis up at the elite levels of heavyweight. Everybody is tough as shit. Nobody has a bad chin. Fabricio Werdum has a legendary chin.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Hunt, legendary chin. Josh Barnett, Stipe Miocic, even getting knocked out by Stefan Struve. Stipe's never, he's obviously got a good chin.
Oh, yeah. Everybody gets knocked out at heavyweight. There's no shame in having a few knockouts on your record.
Junior Dos Santos, Cain Velasquez, all of these people are just monumentally tough. And so at some point, being a guy who hits ridiculously fucking hard it doesn't cut it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where Derrick Lewis is.
Yeah.
And
that's the ceiling.
I love watching him fight. I'm gonna be fascinated to see this because he has absurd power and it's always fun to watch. But if Fabricio Werdum goes all wild man and goes after him, Lewis doesn't have the counter striking to pick him off easily. And I feel like if he goes after Fabricio Werdum, he's setting himself up to be taken down and submitted. Especially his high output kicking game is kind of setting himself up to have a kick caught and have Werdum just fall on him. And if that happens...
How many Derrick Lewis fights does somebody just fall on somebody else? It happens constantly. All of them.
And and if Fabricio Werdum takes him down, I think that...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Lewis's strength is still going to be something... It's interesting. I'll be interested to know how Werdum deals with someone who is just so strong and who doesn't really play by the rules that like a long-time jiu-jitsu black belt might be expecting him to.
Yeah, if Derrick Lewis can just bench press Fabricio Werdum off of him, that would be amazing.
Yes. I want to see a combo where he has Fabricio Werdum on top of him. He bench presses him off into the air, and then out of nowhere, Edmund Terverdian runs into the cage with a chair and gets Werdum back for the disrespect. Combo finisher.
Oh, God.
Most likely something kind of sad.
Barring that, however, I'm picking Fabricio Werdum to win this by submission. At some point, I think Lewis either being wild on offense or throwing a kick that gets caught, gets himself taken down, and Werdum submits him.
I'm a pessimist, I guess, so I should say that my pick was Werdum by decision.
Yeah. I'm gonna watch this. I'm gonna be really thrilled to watch this, though. I think it's,
I'll be on the edge of my seat. I'm not sure how much fun I'll be having, but I will be watching.
Yeah.
You can't say that Derrick Lewis does not sort of demand that you watch.
Werdum opens as the favorite, opening at minus 230, adjusting to minus 240, 250 rather. Been a little bit up and down since then, got up to minus 236 and is now back down to minus 253. And Fabricio Werdum or Derrick Lewis opened at plus 170, got up to plus 211, dropped down to plus 189, and is now back to plus 203. So these lines are sort of slowly oscillating with people. People decide how comfortable they are with Fabricio Werdum calling people maricon over and over.
You don't want to say maricon, by the way. That's the word that Emil Griffith was called when he killed Benny Parrott in the ring. Like, you don't mess with people in that way, man. It's not an acceptable way to treat somebody. Yeah.
Fabricio going the classic, no, it means something different in my country.
Nah,
it really doesn't, but okay.
It means something different means like, well, just more of a say it in my country.
Yeah. We care less.
Yeah. It means something different, but that's all, not to gay people. That's all.
Yeah. Oh. Okay.
All right. Sorry, Fabricio. No, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry at all, actually.
No. Brings us to our co-main event now. Demetrious Johnson, Ray Borg. And we talked about this fight before. My read hasn't changed all that much on it since then, which is that I'm really honestly interested in this fight because Borg is a high-level athlete and he's a confident high-level athlete. I'm interested in this fight in exactly the same way I was interested in Demetrious Johnson versus Henry Cejudo. Like, these are confident athletes who are going to go out there and they're going to try to beat Demetrious Johnson. They're going to work hard at it.
And like Cejudo, Borg is improving at a dramatic rate. Like, he is a real blue chip prospect.
Yep. I do, however, believe that Borg is a step behind where Cejudo was when Cejudo fought Demetrious Johnson.
Yeah.
Which is to say, when I talked about this last time, it hasn't changed any really, but Borg has developed this habit as a striker where he does a lot of feinting and a lot of moving, a lot of in and out, a lot of like pumping his hands and, you know, really trying to like get you psyched out. And what it really, I think, seems to do is it gives his opponent a perfect read on when he actually steps in to throw something.
Yeah.
Because like, and Borg is amazingly fast enough. I think he may even be faster at this point than Johnson. That he still makes it work. Mm-hmm. But even against Formiga, a fighter that other elite athletes have not just, you know, beat, but have finished, Borg couldn't really hurt Formiga because Formiga always saw him coming. So even when he caught Formiga, Formiga was always rolling with the shot, was always braced for the impact, because Borg had, you know, he thinks he's not telling, and what he's really doing is telling a lot.
Yeah.
It doesn't also help that he almost always throws a 1-2 when he throws.
Yeah.
So you know whether it's an uppercut coming, whether it's a straight coming, whether it's a hook coming, you're always going to get the left hand in front of it to tell you exactly the speed that the other punch is coming in at. And then in the clinch, he tends to lock up in the clinch, throw a strike, and then just kind of freeze up if he can't advance position. All of which is not a deep enough, structured enough game to beat Demetrious Johnson right now. Mm-hmm. He will probably have improved on that. He may have added some more variety to his boxing. He may hopefully have stopped telling on the 1-2, or maybe broken his rhythm a little more. Maybe he's added a little more offense in the clinch, but it's not like, I don't expect it to be from that to better than Demetrious Johnson suddenly.
Yeah. Yeah. The things that make Borg an interesting stylistic matchup for Demetrious, like I think you're right. I think he might be faster than Demetrious at this point. Either way, he is one of the faster people in the fastest division in the UFC. So that speed counts for a lot. He is in other ways a phenomenal athlete. He's got power. I think he's not scoring knockouts a lot, but I think he has power in his hands. He's got some snap just from sheer explosiveness. He's a remarkably good scrambler. And I guess a lot of times when you have somebody who is an amazingly good transitional fighter, that is because like everything about Borg's game says remarkable talent, not nearly enough experience, because like he's amazing in the transitions because he moves quicker and sees the openings faster and than most people. But as soon as you lock him into a position or a phase, that is, as we said last time, when he begins to struggle. And it can only be a matter of time before Demetrious Johnson identifies the phase or position in which he wants to lock Ray Borg down, at which point, once Demetrious Johnson has some sort of strategic momentum, he's just going to keep building on it. He's just going to keep expanding those tactics until you have absolutely, you as his opponent feel like you have no options left to you. He has an answer for every single thing you want to do. And that's particularly disheartening when you're a young fighter who doesn't actually offer all that much on the feet or when stuck in a position to begin with. So I think Borg might surprise Johnson early. And honestly, I think he might be smart if he just thought of this fight as, look, I'm not going to win a decision. I should go after him and try to get him out of here early. I think put a ton of pressure on, be really aggressive, force a lot of transitions. That's the kind of stuff that is going to work. It works. Demetrious Johnson is at his best in the 4th and 5th rounds. He can be caught cold. He can be surprised. He needs to sort of figure his opponents out. So Borg can do that and make this really interesting. But barring the extremely unlikely, we're probably looking at Demetrious Johnson figuring him out within 3 rounds. And then either, I think, in round 3 or 4, probably getting the finish, especially because Borg, I expect him to gas because I'm not sure he can, despite the speed, I'm not sure he can explode that frequently at Demetrious Johnson's pace. In fact, I'm sure he can't. So Demetrious Johnson
never had a 5-round fight before.
Right. Yeah. Demetrious Johnson by a 3rd or 4th round TKO, I think is my pick. And I think it might be like a TKO on the ground or against the fence, like in the clinch. I think he might hold on to Ray, trap him in a position, and basically beat him up until the referee has to save him.
One of the things I think that makes me most interested about this fight, honestly, is that speed is really, really hard to figure out and catch up to. Like, if somebody is just faster than you, it's one of the things, too, talking about, like, that Demetrious Johnson, fighters talk about Demetrious Johnson ESPN article, or opponents talk about him. And a lot of them talk about, like, he's so fast, and you can't adjust. Like, you just cannot make up that speed.
Yeah, but if Demetrious Johnson is the guy being asked to adjust, as you hinted at before, speed alone is much easier to adjust to than rhythm, because like, you can be predictable and still be fast, which Borg is in a lot of ways. And Demetrious Johnson will identify those patterns. I don't think Borg is so fast that Demetrious can't possibly react. You can time speed. You can't time something that has no tempo, True.
Yeah. I'm just saying that as a dynamic of the fight, I will be interested to see if Borg can, like, if he can continue to give Demetrious Johnson problems all fight just with his speed.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's like I said, with the, even with the predictability and even with Formiga's ability to roll with the shots and to, like, see them coming, he still got hit a lot because Borg was so fast that it didn't matter that he saw the shots. It just meant that he didn't get hit clean enough to get hurt.
And he may be the first guy that Demetrious has faced who has that particular advantage. If he is indeed fast enough to catch him by surprise over and over, like, who knows how that affects Demetrious.
Other than maybe John Dodson in their first fight, and Dodson dropped Demetrious Johnson multiple times in that first fight. So
yeah, but then also their second fight. Demetrious Johnson's so good. I mean, he's just so good.
But Borg, I want to see Johnson have to face somebody again who's faster than him, and see where what that makes him work on. And I expect that he'll probably lock Borg down in the clinch, because I think that's the area that Borg shows the least offense in his game.
Yeah. Why try to get away from all the speed and when you can just crash in and tie up?
Yep. And Johnson is amazingly good in the clinch.
Oh, yeah. The best.
Odds on this fight, Borg opened at plus 650, adjusted up and down to plus 765, and has slowly drifted down to plus 720.
Yeah.
I
mean, at this point, like, when somebody hasn't lost in like 11 straight fights or whatever, you don't quibble with the crazy odds.
And Johnson opened at minus 1350, adjusted up to minus 1129, and is now at minus 1179. So
yeah, it's fine. I don't care.
Yeah. Brings us finally to the main event: Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee, and this is you.
Well, so I said before at the top of the show, like, it's not as compelling as Ferguson versus Khabib seems to be. Like, I think the letdown here is that Kevin Lee is just not he hasn't cemented himself as this, like, elite contender in the way that Tony Ferguson has, and not in the way that Khabib Nurmagomedov has either. So it does feel like you can expect Tony Ferguson to win. Largely that is because Kevin Lee is not nearly as good a striker as he thinks he is. He is he does, like Ray Borg, like a lot of these guys we've talked about on this card. He like Gilbert Burns, who is always our touchstone for this idea. His moves look good. He's clearly pretty well trained. The ideas are there, but they're not organic or natural in any way. He's surprised a lot by his opponent's striking, where he's like in a position he thinks he's safe, and then they just touch him, and he didn't see it coming. He didn't have an idea of what strike might be coming. Like, there's no anticipation because there's just not a lot of structure in Kevin Lee's striking. But that tells you how good he is, I think, on the ground as a wrestler and a submission grappler, that he has gotten to this point despite really not being a great striker at all. He's The perfect microcosm of that. The Michael Chiesa fight, the turning point was when Kevin Lee accidentally fell down and ended up on bottom, and that was the point at which he began winning the fight. Striking with Michael Chiesa is when he was losing. Grappling from a disadvantageous position against Michael Chiesa is when he began to win. That makes this compelling, because if Kevin Lee can get Tony Ferguson on the ground, I am fascinated to see how their grappling styles match up. Ferguson's all funk. We know it's all like going with the strength, going with the momentum, not struggling, not holding on, not getting too attached to a particular position or submission, always willing to adapt and flow, the like water approach. That's Tony Ferguson's grappling and wrestling game. And Kevin Lee is a much stronger positional grappler. I think he is phenomenally strong, by the way. Like, more you watch over his last fights, the kind of mechanically weak positions he can get stuck in and still lift somebody overhead to throw them to the ground, the way he can pin somebody's hand on the ground when they're struggling and twisting underneath him and keep them in place. And he also was holding on to Michael Chiesa's glove as he was hitting him. But his ground and pound is also very dangerous because he's so solid in his positioning that he and Tony Ferguson actually both have pretty good ground and pound for very different reasons. So I'm fascinated to see that, because Tony Ferguson, like Ray Borg, I think is a fighter who needs those transitions. And his least impressive grappling performances have been, like against Danny Castillo, when someone has stuck him in place, that's the main reason the Khabib fight was so fascinating. Was, can Khabib stick Tony Ferguson in one position? That's the battle we would have showed up to see. And Kevin Lee offers a very similar challenge. He's just also much weaker on the feet than Khabib is. Much more of a liability there. So I think Tony Ferguson's boxing, his aggression, his accuracy, his underrated power, his durability, like all of these things enable him to just stick to the striking and dominate this fight. If he can shut down Kevin Lee's takedowns, if he can avoid the range, especially at which Kevin Lee likes to get his takedowns, then I think he deserves to be a pretty clear favorite. But the moment that Tony Ferguson either consents to go to the ground or gets taken to the ground, this becomes a fascinating matchup. And that's what I will be hoping to see. I want to see these guys grapple. Most likely, though, I think Tony Ferguson is going to find Kevin Lee's chin at some point. And Kevin Lee's chin is not his greatest asset. So I'll say Tony Ferguson by a third round TKO.
Yeah, it's hard to see what Tony Ferguson did to RDA and then see Kevin Lee going into this fight and think he's got the answers.
Yeah, the pace. I mean, the pace alone, like even without all of the great technique and everything, without the adaptability, without the toughness, like he and RDA threw so many shots at a 25-minute bout in Mexico City.
Yeah,
like, Tony Ferguson just doesn't slow down.
Yeah, that was kind of my come to Jesus moment on Tony Ferguson, frankly.
Same here.
Because it was this, like, you know, I've seen him in fights like the Josh Thompson fight and stuff like that, where he kind of like ran himself down a little or got himself caught by things that you really were like, well, I mean, you had this fight in control. You shouldn't be getting lit up now at this point in this fight by these strikes. It was like in a 5-round main event against RDA. I didn't trust it. It's like in Mexico City, he's like, I don't trust you to just keep this insane pace, do all this crazy stuff, and like maintain 5 rounds of offense. And he did it. And it's like, well, shit, I guess I gotta, you know, you gotta rewrite a little.
Fighting intelligently too. Like it wasn't just madness against RDA. It wasn't like it was. He made sure he didn't let RDA pressure. He avoided the range of the wrestling, so he really didn't have to deal with RDA's grappling or wrestling at all. Like, it was a perfect fight.
Yep. And the big thing I think that you didn't mention, but it's a bit like Borg. I don't even know if it may be a little worse than Borg in this case, because Lee isn't as fast. And I think that's maybe the big thing that separates him from like somebody like Borg or somebody like Khabib is foot speed, where, you know, Khabib is ridiculously fast for how clunky he is.
Yeah.
Kevin Lee is not the fastest dude. He's not slow, but by elite standards, he's not blazingly fast on his feet.
And he's agile, but doesn't exactly know what to do with his agility.
Yeah. And and partially too, we're talking about his striking and the problems with it. You remember back when he fought Al Iaquinta, his UFC debut, UFC 169, and he had this sort of pseudo crab style thing going on.
He came from Grand Rapids, so he was trying to do his Michigan shell there.
Tearing that down and building a new striking style has, I think, been the process of years for him, and it's something that has been continually uncomfortable.
Although I also think like that weird stylistic choice that clearly wasn't working for him against a much better boxer, like he's still kind of just that guy, because like Kevin Lee decided to do these moves that he didn't know how they worked.
Yeah,
like you can't go into a fight with like expecting to shoulder roll off shots when clearly you don't really know how to incorporate a shoulder roll into your game. So even now, it's still like the moves will often look correct, but contextually they don't work. You know,
the bigger thing to me is like now what he's doing is much more like fundamental basics.
Yes.
But it is so stuck in a predictable rhythm.
Yeah.
It is just like 1, 2, 3. Okay, combo. 1, 2, 3. Okay, combo. Like there's just this super set pace he strikes at, and it's very readable. And the strikes he throws aren't as readable. He's got a great head kick. He's got some natural power. He can make all that work, but he doesn't he doesn't have the unpredictability or the shocking speed like we were talking about with like somebody like Khabib, who makes that work and just transitions it into these takedowns where suddenly like he was throwing this wild looping hook and then he's in on your hips and you're like, what the fuck is this?
Kevin Lee also, we've mentioned this in the past, he also tends to watch his work at times. That's when he got caught by Leonardo Santos, it's because he like went in with a strike and he kind of hung out to see what would happen. Things just surprise him too often. He's just not ready for his opponent to do to him what he wants to do to them, but only on the feet. I do find it kind of perplexing.
Yeah. And on the flip side, Ferguson is a fantastic broken rhythm striker.
Yes.
Like maybe the best in lightweight division.
Yeah.
Maybe. Like if not the best, then certainly way, way up at the top. For, he's just a fighter that when, there is no specific pace or beat he's setting at any moment. It's just like, okay, I'm going to step in and I'm going to throw this strike. I'm going to try this and I'm going to try this. And I'm going to step at this angle. And I'm going to throw this and I'm going to back out. And then I'm going to actually go over here and I'm going to try this now. And then I'm going to do, and it's a constant thing. Like in the RDA fight, it just gave RDA fits because there's no predictability to it. There's no read on what he's going to throw or when he's going to throw it or where it's going to come from.
And the weird thing is, it's like strategically that becomes a problem. It's not just like you can't time his individual strikes. The difficulty in timing them puts you into a mode in which all you're doing is trying to time him.
Yeah.
You're so perplexed by his seemingly non-existent rhythm that people kind of shut down when they fight Tony Ferguson because he's just like doing this weird flowy thing and they're just trying to understand what's happening. So like a lot of people would have more success if they were more proactive against Tony Ferguson, but he makes it hard to be proactive against him because his style is so weird.
Yeah. And he's tough and he's an opportunist. So the more proactive you get and the more open you get, then the more danger you put yourself in of being finished because you've given him an opening to work with. So, yeah, I think this is a terrible matchup for Lee standing. And if it gets to the ground and like gets to the ground quickly, then it could be a really, really fascinating fight. But without that happening, you got to go with Ferguson by TKO.
I won't be 100% shocked if Kevin Lee hurts Tony Ferguson with a head kick, though, because he does have a really good right high kick. Tony Ferguson does like to kind of sway around and just sort of react to things as they come. Kevin Lee, that's where the speed comes through, is on those high kicks.
It could happen. Lee is so set and predictable in how, like, when he throws strikes, it's so, okay, I've waited 5 beats. It's time to step in and throw another combination.
It's checking his watch to make sure he's on the right schedule with each attack. Yeah.
Yeah, and for it works against somebody like Trinaldo, who's just going to be there and be aggressive, and can get tired and is older, and just at some point you can confuse him with the strike you throw, even if you're throwing it in the same rhythm over and over. He's not going to necessarily read that predictability. Mm-hmm. But I think Ferguson's going to have a beat on it, especially because Ferguson seems like he's got that special, we were talking about Ray Borg, that special kind of crazy, where he's just like going to be absorbed by specific details and be like, I've been watching, I've been sitting outside your house with binoculars for a month, not to see how you fight, but to watch the pace you walk at so that I'll know,
Yeah, and Tony Ferguson too. He has to be lauded for being one of the rare guys in MMA who runs his own camp. He's pretty much in charge of how he trains, and he does travel around a lot, but he does that, and yet he is still well known for remarkable stamina. Like, he is an incredibly hard worker.
Well, you know what the secret is? Huh. The secret is squats with a 300-pound tire on your neck. That's what fighters haven't figured out yet, is that if you put a tire on your neck and then you bend over at the waist and you do squats, magic unlocked.
You can definitely question his methods, but you cannot question his work ethic or his dedication to becoming better at what he does.
Yeah.
Which, a lot of fighters need their coaches to have that. And I don't think Tony Ferguson does. I think Tony Ferguson's, every single one of his training partners could abandon him, and he would still be extremely determined to become a better fighter. So that kind of drive, that special kind of crazy, is something that I'm not sure Kevin Lee has. I'm not sure anyone else. Really think Tony Ferguson probably is the best lightweight on the planet.
Yeah, I mean, it's the kind of Floyd Mayweather dedication is what it reminds me of. Is that same kind of thing. It's that mentality.
Yes.
Where you're just, you see this dude and he's running his own thing, his own show, and you never question that, he's driven enough.
No one has ever questioned, the preparation of somebody like Floyd Mayweather. No one ever questions whether Tony Ferguson's going to come in shape, whether he's going to be able to push a pace. He's just, he's Tony Ferguson, man. He's a unique fighter. I always, whether or not it's a great matchup, which this could be, but I always look forward to Tony Ferguson's fights, and I really think he might be the very best lightweight on the planet. So, yeah,
it's gonna be fun to watch. That's why I can't be unenthused about this card. All these fights are, to me, there's somebody I have to show up to see Tony Ferguson fight. I have to show up to see Demetrious Johnson fight. I have to show up to see Derrick Lewis fight. I have to, Dariush versus Dunham is going to be super fun. I really want to see Bibulatov. I really want to see Duquesnoy. I'm still fascinated by Will Brooks, and I'm fascinated by this Nick Lentz fight. There's just Lando Vannata. There's too much on here that I really want to see.
Yeah, it's a good card. I like it. I can't wait for it.
Ferguson's opening at -185, adjusted down to -238. A little up and down movement on that line, but more or less even at -227 right now. So Lee opened at +145, adjusted up to +191, and other than a odds adjustment right in the middle of all that, it's still up and down a bit, and now at +182. So some movement on those lines, I think, mostly with other odds opening, but
Pat was saying on heavy hands, he thought
a little higher.
Pat Wyman said on heavy hands, he thought that he thought Ferg could be favored more, and I kind of agree. But also, I don't feel like you could really bet on Ferguson even at 2-1, just because I don't know how he responds to Kevin Lee on the ground. But also, like, it's so much less likely to get there than it would be against a guy like Khabib, I think.
Yeah, Ferguson, this is just, like, it's such a good matchup for him standing that, because it's not like Lee is a monster takedown artist.
No, but Lee has surprised me before, so I'm wary. But Ferguson, I think absolutely should be favored. It's not a lock, but I think he is definitely
under 2.5 is plus 110. Ferguson inside the distance is minus 121.
Ferguson inside the distance sounds pretty good at minus 121.
Lee inside the distance is plus 364. I don't think Lee has many ways to win this if he doesn't choke Ferguson out.
Oh, it's the only way he wins anything. He took that title from Michael Chiesa officially. He's the new RNC king.
It's true. All right. On that note, thanks everyone for tuning in. You can find me on Twitter at TheZaneSam. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush, BUSCH. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com in our various roles over there. And we will be back next week for UFC Fight Night, Cerrone versus... No, we won't be back next week. We got a week off.
All right.
So...
Depressed us.
We'll be back for the MMA Depressed Us next week. And we will be back... and we'll have all our normal shows, Bloody Elbow, from Bloody Elbow, Care Don't Care. Well, no Care Don't Care. If I Did It, Heavy Hands, Knuckle Up, all that good stuff. Whatever, you know what it is. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, MMANation.com, DOTCOM, and give this video a thumbs up, like. That helps us a ton. And thanks everyone for tuning in. We will see you soon.